start?
Yes.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to heartily welcome all the participants. And before starting myself, I want to hand over to Ambassador Emil Brix, the Director of Diplomatic Academy, and ask him for a few opening words.
Thank you very much, Werner. It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna on this special occasion, on this talk by Ambassador Ketevan Tsikhelashvili on a very special day for Georgia, the Day of Independence, and already the 30th anniversary of this independence now. And as I know, 103 years after the first independence of Georgia. It's, I think, a very timely subject that the ambassador has chosen, talking about the challenges in the Black Sea region. And it is very obvious that we are going into a less stable situation, not only in the Caucasus, but all over the globe. And Georgia has always stressed, and I think this is something we should really be aware of, that they want to be a stable force. That they want to be a stable force, not only internally, which sometimes, as we know, seems to be not so easy, but also for the region. And I think examples like the meeting of the heads of state with Moldova and Ukraine recently to work for a closer cooperation, also for integration within the European family, are very positive signs of this sort of commitment of Georgia. And that's why I feel that learning a bit more about how Georgia sees the role in this turbulent region with not so easy neighbors is something that we should look forward to. And I've been familiar as former ambassador of Austria to Moscow, what not so stable neighbors mean, and how they can act in their neighborhood, whether they see it as their zone of influence or whatever they call it. And given the fact that over the last few months we have seen so many examples of activities by your big neighbor, it's worth reminding that Europe is well advised to work as close as possible with the partners. And Georgia is one that I think we should really look forward to work closer than we do now. But Werner, this is all I wanted to say at the beginning. I give back the word to you because I'm looking forward to the lecture of Ambassador Tsikhelashvili.
Okay. Thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you also very much for this excellent cooperation between Diplomatic Academy and the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. Before we go into the issue, I just want to introduce you to the ambassador. Ketevan Tsikhelashvili was born in 1978 in Georgia, and she made an academic career on the one hand in Georgia at the State University, and at the other hand also at the Central European University in Budapest, and this was accredited also by the Open University in London. And after her studies in London and at the Central European University, she made her master in international relations and European studies, and insofar she was very well prepared from the beginning. And afterwards, she started a very active professional and, let me say, civic life. She worked for NATO Parliamentary Committee. She worked for Naumann Stiftung. She worked in different places, lectured in Switzerland, and founded several institutions, or one big institution, the Liberal Academy in Tiflis. And she also became the chairwoman of an association of the 115 biggest NGOs of Georgia. And this was more or less the basis for her political career, because she was an outstanding political character already before she overtook any official function. And she became the deputy state minister for reconciliation and civic equality already in 2012. And in 2016, she became the state minister. Yeah. And last year, she became the ambassador in Austria. Thank you very much for your readiness to take part in this dialogue, and we are looking forward to your statements and your presentation. When Director Emil Brix has already talked about the importance of the Black Sea region and the specific situation of Georgia, we have to be aware that the Black Sea is surrounded only by 6 countries. 2 very big ones. The one is Russia in the north and Turkey in the south. And in between are, at the western side, Bulgaria and Romania, 2 members of European Union. And the eastern side, next to Russia, it is Georgia, the smallest, not even the size of Austria, with not even half of the population, but a very important factor. Why? Because Georgia opens the way from the Black Sea region to the Caspian region, and this means also to Central Asia, because it is situated in the middle between high and low Caucasus. And insofar, it's highly interesting from the strategic situation. But this is not my question. The question I wanted to ask you, Mrs. Ambassador, is the following. 30 years after independence, what a period of experiences. And my first question is therefore, what has Georgia in these 3 decades achieved? Where does it stand politically, economically, and socially?
Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you, for the very kind introduction. And thank you for your respective institutions for a long-lasting partnership and friendship with the embassy, with Georgia, and for today's opportunity for me to speak. It's indeed a very special occasion for my country, as you noted. We are celebrating not only the Day of Independence, but 3 decades of this hardly and hard-won, I would say, freedom, which was not without casualties, including and starting from peaceful civilians, women, children, in 1989 in anti-Soviet rallies in the center of Tbilisi, to victims of conflict, Russian aggression, and also in 2008. And of course, these 3 decades are not without challenges as well, rightly noted. The biggest of all up to date is the continued occupation of Georgia's territories, more than 20% of the territories and 2 regions with which Georgia has not only to cope and face and live every day, but to also to go forward. And we can speak a little more in detail about what are those challenges or what are those achievements that count now 3 decades. But there are 2 fundamental things that are made absolutely clear. So one is that freedom is an ultimate and supreme value, and we will not give up on that. And the second is Georgia's European way of development, thus democratic development, is unwavering, and we will also not give up on that. So I'm very grateful, Ambassador Brix, you mentioning the recent memorandum of cooperation between the 3 what EU defines as Eastern Partnership countries, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, respectively, which by no means attempts to diminish the meaning of the framework, which entails 6 countries, but only to empower the aspirations of those states who really want to be the front runners and adapt a very rigorous reform agenda to that of European integration. And by the way, I have to tell you that if there is anything very stable in Georgia in these 30 years, it's a public support, always up to 80% for European integration and Euro-Atlantic integration. That's a big number. 80% of population backs it. And not only population backs it with the surveys, it's written since 2017 in our constitution. So there is a paragraph in the Constitution of Georgia, 78, which states that our way of development is European and Euro-Atlantic integration. I think this tells a lot about where a country is. But also, I'm so grateful here to remind our audience that the date today, basically, 26th of May, is not from 30 years back. It's from 103 years back. So basically, Georgian Democratic Republic takes its roots a century ago. And perhaps one should absolutely stress that it has been one of the first and most progressive socialist democratic states, republics in Europe. I'm considerate of time, and of course I will not go through what it used to be, just maybe an example which can give us a snapshot of history. In the parliament back then in Georgia, there were not only women participating as voters, but women were elected as the members of the parliament in 1919. So in the year and in the times when in some countries, perhaps also in the Europe or modern European Union, where women still were not allowed to vote at all, not to speak to become a politician. And by the way, I must also share with you that Georgia perhaps is the first country which had the first ever democratically elected Muslim woman in a city council, belonging to a religious and ethnic minority, because Georgia is predominantly Christian country. But that happened in those 3 short years of independence, which were still enough to lay a very strong foundation. Our today's constitution also dates back basically to those times of the First Republic. As we speak, just 2 hours ago, in the capital of Georgia, in Tbilisi, where we marked the Independence Day, the remains of General Colonel Georgi Kvinitadze, the Chief of Army of the First Democratic Republic, were flown in from France after a century and laid to peace in Tbilisi. And this man fought fiercely and courageously the Soviet occupation in 1921. But unfortunately, he, likewise, most of the political elite, including the predecessors of the current president, Mrs. Salome Zurabishvili, had to flee Georgia back then. And she today, while speaking at this very occasion, she remembered the times and memories of meeting these people who were longing for their country and trying to cherish the democratic spirit of Georgia abroad. It's very symbolic, I guess. And I must say, in the conclusion of this period, that, by the way, Austria, also back then, was one of the first states who recognized Georgian independence. And not only that, it opened not 1, but 2 consulates in Georgia. So it was in the capital of Tbilisi and in Black Sea city of Batumi. And this is indeed the last one from history, because I suspect that some of our Austrian friends may be listening today. We have a very interesting historic figure which somehow connects our nations, Austrians and Georgians. And this is a famous lady in Austria, Mrs. Berta von Suttner, the Nobel Prize winner, first woman for peace. She lived for 10 years in Georgia in the late 19th century on invitation of her lady friend, the princess of one of the Georgian provinces. Together with her husband, they spent those years, which they always remembered as inspirational, particularly for her pacifist movement and for her already very famous book, Guns Down, I guess. Yeah, so the translation in English. And we have even issued a postmark in the honor of Berta von Suttner, which I gladly will send to your respective institutions. By the way, also the first postal mark was issued on 26th of May, many years back in the First Republic, so it's very symbolic. But I think what we take from there, and I come back to your most important question, how words and calls for peace were relevant back then and are relevant today, because guns are unfortunately pointed also today from the occupied territories of Abrasia and South Ossetia, as I said. And there is a strong military buildup, which represents a very big challenge for Georgia, which we try to cope on everyday basis, but also with a very well-sorted policy.
Yeah, thank you very much for the description. Maybe I can add something. You know, I think our countries are also more or less in common defined by a special relationship to music, because Georgia is famous for its polyphonic development that happened already a few hundred years before the similar development on the in the other countries of the European continent. And insofar, this certainly is very remarkable. And of course, also the question of fine wines. Georgia is famous for its quality of wine. And as we think in Austria, of course, also the Austrian wines can present themselves quite a high level, and therefore there's a lot we do have in common. But may I go a little bit deeper also in the first question, what you have achieved? I mean, when the Soviet Empire broke down, when it imploded, of course, this also was the implosion of a big economic unit. And it seemed that Georgia 30 years ago was one of the poorest countries of the world. You know, there was almost an economic collapse. So far, how or where do we stand now economically in Georgia? And also from the political side, you know, of course, stability is certainly one of the hardest things to achieve in a democracy. You have two parties that fight each other quite a bit. So far, how is economic and political stability in this time?
Thank you, Dr. Fasslabend, also for making the very kind remarks about the music, for polyphonic music and folklore and wine culture, which we are very proud, at least up to date, that we can be claimed as the oldest still discovered wine cradle. And of course, as ambassador to this beautiful country, Austria, I look forward to opportunities, considering COVID restrictions, that we exchange more and present Georgia from its cultural side to the Austrian audiences more. And we were on good track, I must say, bilaterally in the last 3 years before COVID started. Every year, 30% more Austrian tourists visited Georgia. So it is quite remarkable. And of course, when we are through this common global challenge, I hope that this good trend will be revived and developed further. And of course, you're right. You mentioned the challenges. This was not easy when the Soviet Union collapsed. Well, Georgia, economically speaking, as an entity within the Soviet Union, definitely would be qualified as one of the, let's say, richest, even though the rich and any sort of discrimination in that sense would be something not proper for the Soviet policy. But and this solution was painful, just because how Soviet Union as an empire was built, right? With territories, with economy, everything was quite mindfully intertwined. So for instance, 40% of Georgia's economy was industry, which was very much intertwined with the industry somewhere, you know, thousands of kilometers away and hundreds of kilometers away. Likewise, in many countries, though, to produce one product, you would need supplies from many different parts. So that's why, and that was meant to be kind of a deterrent for the dissolution of this huge empire. Likewise, for instance, it's no coincidence that conflicts erupted all over the neighborhood. When you just look at the map, probably by now we already know that it's no coincidence that what we mentioned as Eastern Partnership, you know, there are 6 countries and 5 of them suffer unresolved conflict, and all of them, perhaps Ukraine in the blatant phase went the least in 2014, but all of them erupted very soon. That is kind of part of the Soviet nationality policies, kind of Matryoshka doll principle. So if something dismantles, the bigger crash has to follow at all different levels. And we struggled our way. Of course, we struggled hard. There were especially hard 90s, the years where we struggled for good governance, you know, elimination of corruption, investments, etc., and so on, conflict, civil unrest. But I think we can safely say that we made it on track, and we are steadily in the progress phase already since over a decade, which is, of course, good. And our associated relations with the European Union, which includes, by the way, deep and comprehensive free trade agreements. So it is more than just free trade. It's about the whole acquis. It's about a safe environment for investments, easy doing business, regulations that are similar to that of most European countries. So this is all in place, and we are in different Georgia than we definitely have been 30 years ago. Of course, we are still very far away from our targeted benchmarks, and when it comes to welfare of each and every individual, the poverty is still there, and we are working every year to reduce it bit by bit, and it works. We will see what is the implication of COVID, because Georgia is not alone. I mean, but we can assume that for the countries which still are on the economic transition, this could be a double blow as compared to countries which are already welfare states. However, we very much hope that with now vaccination, this third wave kind of over, with open up strategies, like here in Austria, our COVID calendar pretty much looks the same as in this country. So we will revive tourism, which suffered also in Austria and also in Georgia. And we will take a benefit of free trade agreements that we have with many different countries, including, by the way, with China. And you mentioned, Dr. Fasslabend, also the possibilities, as Dr. Briggs, Ambassador Briggs also mentioned, because Georgia is so positioned well, in a sense, between the different regions, connecting East and West, and being on the historical trade route, which is relevant also today. So this is where we take our opportunity. This is where we see our role, and we profile ourselves as safe, and we strive for peace and stability, safe place for investments, safe place for trade, safe place for logistics, safe place for transit, transport. And I think this will bring us to where we want economically. Politically, we have a vibrant life. I think it's quite, we have several parties, too many parties even. I mean, you can't say in democracy that there are too many, but there are parties in young democracies that some emerge and go, but some stay. And I think if we look like a little bit, zoom out and look big picture, we are consolidating ourselves now into multi-party democracy step by step, because we moved from presidential system to parliamentary system. We will fully move to proportional system in 2024. So only party lists will be voted in the parliament, which urges for our parties to consolidate themselves as party structures more. And at the end of the day, this will be, despite all the difficulties, this will go into this direction. So we are the country where the freedom of speech is guaranteed, all the freedoms are guaranteed, democratic principles, and this is, for us, how to say, it's a matter, it's a vital matter, it's a factor of security. Consolidation of democracy is a security, because we don't only view Russian tanks and barbed wires now as a challenge to our security, which it is, in fact, but also the attempts to hamper Georgia's European and democratic development. Because if I want to be very open, what we see in these 30 years whatever and whoever labels Russia's ambitions as you wish, but it's kind of a sort of neo-imperialistic ambitions, a kind of nostalgia for Soviet Union, you know, to keep the influence or grab the influence that are surrounding Russia. Not only by tanks, they are seeking to have entities around them which are alike but weaker, to keep in its orbit and not to gravitate elsewhere, perhaps to a more attractive pole, such as, for instance, European Union or our aspiration to NATO. So it is also about the model of development, and consolidation of democracy for us is an absolutely vital and essential task. So I think when you ask me, where do we stand? We stand on unwavering way of progressing toward, or let's say, consolidating democracy and progressing to better economic welfare. But of course, we have to be mindful of daily challenges that occupation poses. You mentioned my post as a minister. I worked quite long there, also as 4 years as a negotiator in peace talks before I became a minister. And I can tell you that it's a very, very complex issue, and of course, a very strong stance of international community like Austria has now in support of Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It's very important for the end goals of achieving the occupation.
Yeah. Mrs. Ambassador, you mentioned already the challenges you were confronted with in 2008, namely independence movements in South Ossetia and Abrasia, backed by Russia. More or less two independent units now, only recognized by a handful of countries. And of course, there's still the Georgian claim for these regions. How is the situation in those two provinces, in those two regions? Not only in those two regions, but you have to be aware this was not only a challenge for Georgia, but this was a challenge, or became a challenge, for world order, because it was for the first time after the end of the Cold War that there was military movements and invasions into other countries. How is the situation in South Ossetia and in Abkhazia at the moment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You rightly mentioned that during the collapse and shortly after these regions, or let's say artificial divisions already back then into autonomies, etc., or nationality policies have been manipulated, or ethnic differences also have been manipulated very badly to cause the conflicts and leverage them, of course, to keep the influence. Yeah, a situation by now is very difficult. Number one, the situation has nothing to do with independence. I mean, the whole so-called independence claim is a fiction, because they are fully dependent on Russia, and Russia has exclusive and full control all over domains of life. Yeah, the so-called recognition policy also from Russia largely failed, as you rightly mentioned. So international community, of course, did not share this illegal act and unilateral act from Russia. And I have to also tell to the attention of audiences, when we speak about the will of people inside these regions, one has to bear in mind that the majority of population is exiled, and they are not allowed to return to their homes or express their will. And majority of population, predominantly Georgians, so 300,000 people for Georgia, it's quite a big portion of its population, is still out of these regions. So in short, if I wanted to characterize the situation for you to imagine what life is, it's very much getting more and more like a military ghetto, especially in South Ossetia, which is landlocked and which is surrounded by 100 kilometers of barbed wires, which kind of artificially divides the villages and the whole territory from the rest of Georgia. In the north, you know, there is a huge Caucasus Mountain range and one tunnel, which was built, by the way, in 1980 only. And in winters, that gets closed. So the region gets virtually closed down. And it's no surprise that it's 80% depopulated. There are around 20,000 people living there, by the way. Abrasia is 70% depopulated. So it includes IDPs, so internally displaced persons, but also people who want to leave because they see no prospects for life. And if I want to compare this obnoxious situation, if you happen in these villages, to anything, you know, when part of houses are divided from the other part of the houses, and neighbors cannot even come together to shake hands because there is a 2-meter high barbed wire, literal barbed wire, and the Russian patrols are going back and forth and, of course, detaining any person who tries to climb. And there are more and more people trying to climb these barbed wires and barriers from the occupied territory. I don't know, for healthcare, for food, for medication. You know, these are living, breathing people, and it's difficult to live in isolation. So it's a total human tragedy. Just to save time, because I showed it to somebody who was interested, I can tell you, for instance, these are pictures from South Ossetia, our times. So you see that?
Yep.
You would recognize also some figures. So this is so-called South Ossetian president. The kids are urged to, you know, do the pioneer songs. This is in Abrasia already. So these are kind of military games which are very popular in kindergartens and schools. And somehow every week there is something going on to mark the Soviet dates and revive this Soviet atmosphere, which I find, again, you know, as a person who had to deal daily with that for many years, as a policymaker, very tragic, and especially tragic for the youngsters who are trapped there and, of course, confronted with such a surrealism, to pay a tribute to something that is gone, that is, we know, evil in history, and with that they are deprived the prospects of development. So no surprise that people want something better. So as a policymaker, 2 years back from now, I have tried to put forward a new peace plan, which foresees small trade, education possibilities, health care possibilities, different benefits and services provided to the residents of these occupied territories. It's a part of our reconciliation policy. And I can absolutely, with 100% back what I'm saying, that we have absolute interest from the population, despite the very bitter experience of conflict, of course, and split families and victims on both sides. There is eagerness for interaction. There is eagerness for rational communication, which is interrupted artificially by the barbed wires, by closing down the so-called crossing points, you know, and it's a very classic divide and rule attempt. Let's put it this way. However, I think that at the end of the day, with the steadfast policy, with the rational policy, like not only this initiative, but generally we have towards our own regions and populations with whom we want to engage, sharing the benefits that Georgia gets, for instance, with integration with the European Union, visa-free movement, visa liberalization, something like a dream for somebody. Imagine, who cannot just move around his own village, just an idea of getting free to, I know, 4,000 kilometers away and travel and know the world. It's very attractive. And I believe that barbed wires like Berlin walls and walls in general are not only illegal and against the international law, but against the law of nature. So they will absolutely go down, but it's a very steadfast fight. So we cannot do this fight alone. This is why we have Geneva international talks. We have EU as the main facilitator. We have UN. We have OSCE, where I also represent here in Austria, in Vienna, my country. I have an honor to do that. And together, of course, we try to achieve the tasks of, one, the occupation when it comes to Russia, and dialogue when it comes to Georgians and Abkhaz and Georgians and Ossetians. And there is a lot of prospect for this dialogue, I can once again assure you.
Yeah. Now, maybe let's have a look a little bit outside Georgia, going towards the east. We're in a situation, where on the one hand Armenia and on the other hand Azerbaijan just were confronted each other with real fighting, with a real war. And we are now in a situation where everybody is hoping that some peace and stability can be reached. Nobody knows what will be the further outcome. Of course, we had a new situation in regard to the relationship between Russia and Turkey. And insofar, things changed quite a bit. So far, we really would be interested, what is your personal analysis on the situation around Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan? And maybe also going a little bit further, how do you see the new relationship and intervention from outside, being Russia on the one side and Turkey at the other side?
Thank you for this question. Of course, Georgia has vested interest in peace in the region and stability. Despite we all understand that unresolved conflicts are a source of instability in itself, because let's put it this way, but of course we need to resolve the conflict. For us, peace and peaceful resolution of the conflicts has no alternative. And of course, any hot conflict or military confrontation poses threats to the stability and security and takes lives. Yeah, we are very sorry, of course, to see and to be a part in the region of these very sad developments that claims lives, including, I guess, as reported last night. Yeah, there are some sporadic exchange of fire, but the ceasefire is now largely, after a weeks-long, confrontation and many casualties, the ceasefire is largely achieved. Georgia, for its part, offered its good offices also for talks to our neighbors, and with both of them we have very good, strong relations and friendly relations. So we are interested that we can find a common ground, including for instance, regional projects that could be of benefit to all of us. But of course, for that we need to secure peace, and we have very vested interest in this peace, as I told you. Tbilisi and Georgia, because Karabakh conflict did not start now in 2021, right? This is also part of the chain of the conflicts I was speaking about just some moments ago. And Tbilisi also served this year as kind of unspoken as a common ground for meeting of our neighbors, yeah, Azerbaijanians and Armenians, and who would be most interested to, apart from good offices, try to help some rational communication beyond the talks, and the people-to-people contact, if you wish, as well at different levels. So at the end of the day, when we look strategically, as a result of what happened and the ceasefire agreement that was exclusively secured to be mediated by Russia, we have an increased Russian presence in the region. Now we have 4, let's say, military strongholds. One military base in Armenia, the 2 military, I mean, there are several of it, but strongholds in Abkhazia and South Ossetia with around 10,000 Russian military personnel, which is quite big, and it goes beyond, with the military capacities, it goes beyond the range of Georgia. It's a regional security threat, if you want to imagine how big it is. And now we have 2,000 so-called peacekeepers. Well, peacekeepers, I would say, but in our experience, the blue helmets were very quickly translated into a regular army for instance, when we had Russian peacekeepers for years in the context of our conflict in Abrasia, and South Ossetia. So we are worried about that. We are for more international engagement, and international meaning truly international. I think there is more room for OSCE Minsk group also to play, and for OSCE at large, because we are discussing this problematic very extensively at OSCE, and the debates here mirror very well the situation on ground. We have also Turkey as of course, who has stakes in the regional developments, and in a way, Turkey is also balancing the Russia's presence, kind of exclusive presence on ground. At the end of the day, because I am the ambassador of Georgia, and I can definitely speak of Georgia's view or Georgia's position, how we view ourselves. We think that we absolutely shall move exclusively, of course, peacefully towards rational grounds where we can talk about projects again which benefits all three states of the Southern Caucasus. This is the only future we can imagine that could be viable or stable. And of course, meantime, we are seeking the peaceful resolution of the conflict. I once again want to absolutely underline that peace has for Georgia no alternative, but resolution of the conflict is absolutely necessary for durable peace and stability in the region. Turkey is a very strong partner of Georgia and very close partner of Georgia. We have strategic partnership with Turkey. We have a very broad spectrum of cooperation. Turkey, after European Union as a entity, is the biggest trade partner for Georgia as well. Then it's followed by, including our neighbors are very, we have very strong ties with both Azerbaijan and Armenia. Russia, after embargo 2006, which was a punishment measure for Georgia, was lifted. And by the way, our attempt, with the absence of diplomatic relations with Russia, because we can't have any diplomatic relations while parts of our territories are occupied, still to have some talks at the level of special representative of the Prime Minister who talks to the Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia on issues of trade, transport, flights, people-to-people contacts. This proves that we are not seeking confrontation. We are seeking stability. We are seeking good neighborly relations with everybody. This is essential for Georgia. And not only seek that, but we try to contribute to that once again. And we will do all what it takes, including in relations with our neighbors, of course, given the deoccupation as a primary goal with Russia, because it's a fundament of any interstate relations, right? You have to respect the sovereignty, my being, in order to be in a fully fledged normalized relations. So you cannot just take away parts of another state. Like you said, 2008 indeed was the first forcible attempt to change the borders. Very dangerous one. For Georgia, it's dramatic and tragic, but we have seen that it has started into a chain. 2014 Ukraine was largely, I would say, preconditioned by what happened in 2008 in Georgia. There is a linkage, not only in timing, but in methods, in instruments that Russia is using. There is a linkage. What happens then on Russia's engagement, bolder engagement in Middle East. And sometimes it's not only about tanks, it's sometimes also about other means of hybrid warfare. It's a very popular term today, hybrid warfare. We know it since 90s, right? We know the disinformation. We know how our democratic development has been endangered. Also, there have been attempts in Georgia. Russians don't have any stronghold in terms of political parties or, some movements that would be pro-Russian. They can't do that. Thanks God, they can't do that. But you see, this threat goes beyond the region. Maybe 10 years ago, it would be very unlikely to anticipate that in some European countries and even overseas, there would be at all any debate about Russia's possible intervention in elections, right? Who would imagine that here parties would discuss whether Russia intervened or not? That's a danger. That's another sort of danger. Maybe it's not, the ambassador is not a tank, but it's an attack on the values. It's an attack on democracy in a way. So we have to vary, and we have to see that the security concerns in Georgia, or widely in the South Caucasus, because we talked about another conflict as well, is linked to the European security at large. So this is why I completely understand that maybe for a citizen here in Austria or in any other country, sometimes it's difficult to understand why, for instance, a conflict or barbed wire in the village of Georgia would matter to the security here. But again, if we analyze it in a wider context, it does matter because it has implications, definitely implications that come over time. So if something which is illegal against the international norms is tolerated at one place, it encourages similar actions in the other place. So it's kind of a domino effect. So this is why we are so interested in peace, securing peace, especially in this relatively small region of South Caucasus. And of course, the key to that is international. The key to that is mutually beneficial economic projects, which can benefit all. And I think this is our own role and predisposition, I would say, while we are totally determined to keep our very strong, good neighborly relations, both with Armenia and Azerbaijan, and definitely Turkey, which is a NATO member and very important partner on the Black Sea security. Black Sea security is still yet another dimension for us, which is very, very important.
Yeah, yeah, and this certainly this special relationship or good relationship you have to Azerbaijan and Armenia, the two other South Caucasian countries, certainly defines more or less the most important role of Georgia within the region. Try to add to the stability, because history has shown us this region always was in the interest of powers from outside, whether this was the Persian Empire or the Ottoman Empire or the Russian Empire. And insofar, you have to say that probably unity between the South Caucasian countries is the most important factor in order to gain enough self-weight and keep powers from outside out of the region. And insofar, this certainly is one of the biggest challenges one can imagine. So far, my question, in this important, not only regional, but let me say almost global game, what do you think, which role could EU play? What is the importance of European Union for Georgia and for the region as a whole?
The key role, I think EU plays and can play even more so the key role for the welfare, for security, and for development of the region. For Georgia, the EU is the target. So we have declared about our aim of membership, and we even have the date when we will file up for our application for membership just in a few years, in 2024. Not because we are naive or we want to disregard some challenges that the EU may have on its own, after big waves of enlargement, just because it's a stated goal. That's our destination ultimately. So whatever it takes, this is where we view Georgia. So it defines also our domestic agenda. And the EU as an actor, as a political actor, as economic actor, as security actor through its soft means, or maybe even through its ESDP mission, because we have EU monitoring mission on ground since 2008, which is the only international mission on ground. And even though Russia still hampers the EU to go implement its mandate on both sides of the occupation line, as it is mandated to do, and Russia violates its own commitments which it undertook in the ceasefire agreement mediated by the EU, still the monitoring mission, where Austria has, by the way, 4 monitors, and thank you for that, is present as the most important and sole international actor on ground. The EU is the main facilitator of the peace talks in Geneva. The EU is the major partner of Georgia through the association agreement. So the EU is also the major trade partner, and the EU is the main investor, with 43% of all investments coming from the EU countries. So we are, let's say, particularly Georgia, speaking about Georgia, and I want to also explain a little bit why it's important to, and why we have, for instance, now the memorandum of 3 beyond South Caucasus, right? We are working with Ukraine and Moldova, similarly, who have the association agreements already and who claim that they want to go that fast. It's important that every state is rewarded, let's say, on the basis of individual merit, or reciprocated, let's put it this way. Reciprocation would be a better word from the EU side, because it is an incentive for the others in the region also to see that dedication to certain reform agenda, certain values, certain movement, is rewarding. First of all, for its own society. It takes benefits, right? So it is about individual freedoms, it's about better life, it's about more secure life, it's about freedom of movement. And this is so important. This is why we are so keen to achieve even more in our partnership. So we definitely view EU as the key actor, while we have strategic partnership with the United States, and this also defines largely our foreign policy. EU is kind of a family where we belong. This is a self-perception of Georgia. And I think strategically speaking, EU can even step up its role in the whole region, in the Black Sea, including for the reasons that EU members are the neighbors of the Black Sea. So there is a vested interest into this. Not only Georgia or Ukraine, who are the literal states of the Black Sea, are the members of the EU. We have another NATO member which is out there on the Black Sea. And you're totally right. Historically, this has been an interesting destination for many powers. Obviously, because it's strategically important. Yeah, it is for energy routes, which is still very relevant, including for Europe. It's connecting, and this also explains maybe a little bit our philosophy on how we see how important this bridge building role is for Georgia. Very much maybe like Austria, because Austria, taking an advantage of its location, I think very much also views itself as bridge between, including within Europe or European Union, even sometimes bridge between East and the West, because it is located comfortably. And where geopolitics is very, very challenging for us, geography definitely suggests some opportunities. So, and for instance, Georgia is one of the unique countries which has free trade agreement with the EU, but also free trade agreement with China. So mind that it provides totally different opportunities for investment or economic activity in the country, which has access to both markets, a huge markets for Georgia alone. So this is an opportunity, and we do that. We try to use it as a transit route. We try to build our relations on common good, common benefit with our neighbors as well. And I think that European Union, as an actor who is interested, first of all, in its own stability, and now the EU strategic security document talks that you cannot ensure an island of security if you have uneasy waters around. So you need stability, including in the South Caucasus region. So it's a vital interest of the European Union. And given all its soft powers, given its incentives, just what was so smartly used during enlargement, when the European Union accepted new members. We remember conditionality. We remember all the packages. It smartly used this power. Sometimes now I'm a little bit taking off my hat of an ambassador, as I am from European studies. I lectured my students. I always said that EU has more powers than it projects. And I believe it's so, it's true so, including politically, but also economically.
Yeah.
For instance, including in its relations with the same Russia, I understand the rationale. Of course, there is a business, there is economy. Russia, of course, is a great opportunity. And we are also interested in normal relations. Nobody seeks conflicts with Russia. But not to forget that the bigger consumer is the EU. So EU is the one who pays the money. And that gives some powers also to consumers in market economy, let's put it bluntly. So I think politically speaking, it's vital. It's vital that EU remains engaged. EU remains a major actor in peace and dedicated to peace and conflict resolution. And I'm happy that it is one of the priorities. It may take time, but it surely will lead to the solution. By the way, this year we have a milestone judgment of Strasbourg Court on the interstate case Georgia versus Russia, which recognized Russia responsible for many crimes, also human rights crimes during the war or afterwards. And it is yet another leverage to also legally, peacefully, legally fight the injustice that is taking the place and that is hampering, including regional development.
Okay, I think I look a little bit at the clock and I see that we are more or less at the end. There would have been quite a few further questions, like, I don't know, activities from Chinese side, maybe just a few words from your side before coming to the end.
Yeah, well, it's globally, it's a huge topic, right? So we could not potentially cover that in the remaining time, but as I said, I mean, now again, keeping it more profiled or regional, it is a factor. Globally, China is a rising factor. Nobody can come from kind of ignore that, sorry. It's an important factor for Georgia, which is a small country in numbers. Again, you know, it's essential and even vital to sort non-confrontational, peaceful relations with everybody and take it as an opportunity. For instance, trade with China quite dramatically increases from one year to another. As I said, in 2017, we have the free trade agreement with China. We are the 11th country with which China has free trade agreements. I think it's part of Chinese policy to have more of these free trade agreements with many countries, especially which are on this one belt, one road route that connects with Europe. But we definitely see it as opportunity, for businesses, but other investors, including European investors.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, for your statement that were very frank and just impressive due to your competence, your personal competence, and your analytical mind that you brought into this dialogue. Thank you very much. And maybe going from there to our next session, you know, next week on Wednesday, will be the 2nd of June. We will occupy ourselves once again with European Union that you mentioned so many times. And the issue will be the future of European defense. Certainly one of the most discussed issues, and maybe the example of Georgia, the example and the needs and the situation of the South Caucasian region shows us very clearly that there is a need for Europe to shape some progress. And insofar, thank you very, very much, Mrs. Ambassador, for your presentation, for your analysis, and we are looking forward to further excellent cooperation. Thank you, and a farewell to all our participants on the screen. Thank you very much. Special thanks, of course, also to Ambassador Emil Brick and Diplomatic Academy for the good cooperation.
Thank you very